Good evening. Welcome. On behalf of the Board of Directors and our staff, welcome to the historic Lanphear livery and the Watch Hill Conservancy's beautiful community gathering space, the Chaplain B. Barnes Reading Room. So great to see you all. I'm Deborah Lamb. I'm chairman of the Watch Hill Conservancy. Before we move on to tonight's presentation, I want to take a moment to thank our community programming sponsors for 2024. We were fortunate to have 17 businesses and families agree to sponsor our work this year. They sponsor both the public programming that happens in this space and programming that we take on the road, if you will, as well as they help to support the maintenance and care for this meeting space. So thank you very much to our sponsors. Can we take a minute and put our hands together to thank our sponsors? I also want to take a minute to remind you or to direct your attention to the beautiful photographic exhibit that is in the atrium of the livery. It is a compilation called Watch Hill Through the Lens of photographer Edward Burdick, Edwin Schofield, and George Bishop. And the photo exhibit will be up until next Monday, July 22nd. Please take a few minutes to take a look at it. It's really cool to see how things used to be, how much change has happened, and what hasn't changed. Our GIS expert, Peter August, always uses those old photos and takes what hasn't changed to help orient us with our current photos. Speaking of Peter, I'd like to hand the mic over to Peter, my esteemed colleague, the president of the Watch Hill Conservancy, and our chief science advisor, Dr. Peter August.
I think on an evening like this, it's the steamy Peter August, not esteemed. It's a little bit muggy this evening. It's really my distinct pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, Simon Teakle, an internationally recognized figure in the jewelry industry. Born in England, Mr. Teakle is a graduate gemologist with a diploma from the National Association of Goldsmiths. Simon spent 20 years with Christie's, first in London, and subsequently headed their jewelry department in New York, where he contributed to the sale of many of the world's most notable gemstones and private collections, including the Rockefeller Sapphire, jewelry belonging to Eva Peron, and the $12 million sale of Doris Duke's jewelry. Mr. Teakle now has formed his own company, Simon Teakle Fine Jewelry and Objects, specializing in rare and unusual jewelry and objects, as well as discreetly negotiating private treaty sales. An avid buyer, Simon uses his extensive knowledge of period jewelry and important gemstones to assist his clients around the world. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Simon Teakle.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. And when Grant asked me to talk a few months ago to you, I jumped at the chance, and I hope it doesn't sound too self-serving, but Grant said, we want to hear about your stories. And for somebody who barely scraped through school, didn't go to university, much more interested in the cricket pitch and the pub than school, jewelry has been very, very kind to me. And a lot of my life has been in the auction world, but has exposed so much to me, whether it's the objects, the people, the places. And really, it's all about the discovery, and the excitement of the business is exactly that. And so I'll just walk through a few of the things that I've been lucky enough to pass through my hands. And I'm delighted, and explain what they are and how we approach jewelry. And also I'll try to weave in the market a little bit, because people are always asking me, what about diamonds and lab diamonds and colour stones? And it's all really interesting, but there are sort of good, sound answers to them all, and I'm delighted to answer any questions until the end I've been given a 45-minute brief, which I'll try and follow. So I'm sure it'll be fine. So talking of the discovery, after my sort of life at Christie's, it is a sort of, there we are, there is a sort of familiarity in what one's dealing with. And when you're searching, the wonderful thing about jewelry, it can appear from anywhere, and whoever it may be, you should absolutely never judge a book by its cover. Anyway, I had had my own business for about a week. And a dealer who I know in Florida, who I know very, very well, but he's all about big diamonds and this and this and this. He goes, Simon, I found this, and it says Cartier, but I think it's horrible. I said, okay. It belonged to this guy. There's an engraving on it called Posseoff. I said, okay. I said, it sounds quite interesting. And I said, do you have a sense of value as to how much you want for it? And just as a sidebar, when one's buying jewelry, it's much easier to buy from a dealer than it is from a private individual. Because if you buy from a private individual, 9 times out of 10, they're going to think that you're insulting them, because the jewelry market is really divided into two. You have the rare objects, Cartier, Van Cleef, Bulgari, beautiful 18th century jewelry, and that you pay a premium for. And then you have that sort of middle range jewelry, and there's nothing wrong with it. But I explain to people, if you go to the jewelry shows in Hong Kong, or if you go to the jewelry shows in Switzerland, the volume of this jewelry is quite overwhelming. So you're not taking into account manufacturing costs and retail costs and insurance and shipping and all that stuff. And you really have to go back to basics, and it's just its intrinsic value. So very often I am in the sad position of giving people sticker shock. But it does happen the other way around as well when you find something really great. Anyway, my friend down in Florida had this, and he said, there are 200 grams of gold. Okay. It didn't belong to Posseoff. It is a 17th century carved ruby and spinel Buddha that was looted from the Summer Palace in Beijing and belonged to Prince Felix Yusupov, who, as I'm sure many of you know, he was the famous one who murdered Rasputin. So the provenance was absolutely fantastic. But I sort of, with a dealer, when you're dealing with private individuals, you absolutely do the right thing. Sort of with the dealers, all bets are off. You're in the business, you do your research, you do your due diligence. And I said, how much do you want for it? And he said, will you give me $25,000 for it? I said, take 22? No, I'll take 24. So I said, fine, okay, here's the check. Having been in business a week, I'm too embarrassed to tell you what I sold it for. But having been a week in business, it got me off to a good start. But the great thing about, and spinels, just as a sideline, spinels until the middle of the 19th century were always thought to be rubies. There wasn't the gemological understanding, there wasn't the separation between a ruby and a spinel, and the prince's ruby in the crown jewels, it's called the prince's ruby, is in fact a spinel. And spinels actually, they don't have the value of rubies, but they are the most beautiful stone. And I was talking with somebody about garnets, and you've got the obvious stones, the rubies, the emeralds, the sapphires. But there are so many other beautiful stones out there, and there's just such... Anyway, it's great. Right. Going back to my Christie's days, and I have a dear friend in the audience who knows all about this collection. This is a collection of jewellery that belonged to Doris Duke. And when Doris Duke died, Stephen Lash, who I'm sure many of you know, our chairman, was it Bernard? We all got in a room meeting, and how are we going to? We're going to do the appraisal. Stephen said, first thing, be nice to Bernard. Bernard was the butler. Anyway, the jewellery that Doris Duke had, it was the most wonderful collection of early 20th century jewellery that actually belonged to her mother, Nanaline Duke. A lot of the jewellery that Doris Duke bought in her later life, she had a passion about India and Indian jewellery, and she has her house in Hawaii, Shangri-La. Is it still open? Which is the most incredible collection of Islamic art. When I first started at Christie's at King Street, very junior, we had this amazing collection of Indian jewellery which we were selling in Geneva. And we got wind that Doris Duke was going to have a look at it, come and have a look at it. And for some reason I was told to go and meet her at the front door at the Richemont Hotel. Miss Duke, very nice to meet you, very nice to meet you. How was your flight? Oh, it was fine. I slept on the plane. And I took a 5-hour nap on the runway on my plane, which was this huge plane. And I said, you know, I'd love to take you a tour of the collection. And she picked up 2 of the Indian pieces, and she said, well, they're very light. Walked out and went home. And that was it. It was amazing. But we sold this collection in 2003, and at the time, one is staggered by the prices that you achieve. The necklace, it's all Cartier. The necklace on the left made $1 million. The tiara made $300,000. And those are briolette diamonds hanging from the earrings, which are like faceted beads. And the briolette diamond is so beautiful. I think those made $85,000. And at the time, these were fantastic prices. And we were so excited, and the foundation was so happy. The way that prices have gone on with Cartier now is each piece is worth at least 3 or 4 times that. And what's interesting about the jewelry world is when I tell people I'm in the jewelry business, you know, how's the jewelry market? You have the diamond market, you have the jewelry market, you have the colored stone market, you have the pearl market. So you have all these different markets moving in different directions at different times. And currently, the white diamond market is very soft. And I have an example to tell you about in a moment. The colored stone market is on fire. The natural pearl market is soft because it's not as active in the Middle East. And the jewelry market for the Van Cleefs and the Cartier is very, very strong. Because when people spend a significant amount of money on something, you know, it doesn't matter whether you're spending $5,000 or $500,000, just, I think it's the same with any, buy the best that that amount of money can buy. But this, as I say, it was a fabulous and this was really my swan song with Christie's, although on the introduction we mentioned the Rockefeller sapphire. Sapphire in the colored stone market, it's very important when you're buying a colored stone that a certificate accompanies it. Its origin plays a huge role in its value, and the pecking order is Kashmir, Burma, Ceylon, Madagascar, and then sort of the rest. And then you have, has it been heat treated? Have any of the inclusions been glass filled? So if ever you're looking to purchase a coloured stone, it's very important that you get a certificate. Or if you're looking to sell something, also make sure that you get, or the person, whoever you're talking to, gets one on your behalf before they make a meaningful offer, because it does make a huge difference. Anyway, this was 48 carats, and it really was like a swimming pool. It was clean, and it is widely acknowledged to be the finest sapphire in the world. It belonged to John D. Rockefeller. It was purchased he purchased it from the Nizam of Hyderabad. The intermediary on that transaction was somebody called Raymond Yard, who many of you may have heard of. And Raymond Yard was somebody who worked for the jewellery firm Marcus at the end of the 19th century. And he got to know John D. Rockefeller, and they got on very well, and John D. Rockefeller financed his business, and he went out on his own, and he was always known for exceptional stones and craftsmanship. And this was really the prize of his collection. It was sold in the early mid-1980s, when, I don't know if you remember in the art world, the Japanese market was absolutely on fire, and particularly with Impressionist and post-Impressionist paintings. And the Japanese department stores would be buying these art collections and precious jewels and exhibiting them in these stores. Anyway, at the height of all of that, a Japanese supermarket bought this. Then everything goes pear-shaped. And towards the end of the 1990s, they want to sell it, which was not a good time for selling jewellery. They had paid $4 million for it. And we said, look, I don't know if we can get that for you. Anyway, we finally put it in with a reserve, a selling price of $3 million. We really struggled to sell it. And it was just, and as I say, it's the best, the best. And it's all a question of timing. And it was bought by this very important, very, very wealthy Singaporean, who, after he paid $3 million for the first time with Christie's, he wanted to pay by American Express. And at that stage, I don't think Christie's ever heard of credit cards. And the only reason he wanted to pay by American Express is that he wanted the air miles. I promise you. And I said, Putra, why don't you buy your own plane? I said, it's so much easier. It was a game to him. It was a total game. Anyway, if this came on the market today, it's $10 or $15 million of anybody's money, and people would queue up to buy it. And it's funny how timing is so important with everything. And if you're brave enough, people always say, buy when the market is bad. Here is another example of that, and I won't dwell on these too long, but these are they were diamond earrings by Cartier, and they are 20 carats each, D-flawless, and I sold these again in the mid-90s, where D-flawless diamonds, people really didn't want them very much, and it's sort of the same today. I think probably for different reasons. When I first came to New York, it was the tail end of the bonfire of the vanities. And, one would go to these parties in New York, and it was Harry Winston necklaces and D flawless diamonds and big cluster earrings. People don't wear jewelry like that anymore. It's much, it's in a much more understated way, and I think people maybe concentrate on jewelry rather than gems. So there's an element of that in America. There's an embargo on Russia and Russians buying important stones. The Middle East, there's still a strong jewelry market there, but it's not as strong as it was. That's today. But these were purchased by a client of mine in the Midwest when the market was soft, and he paid $2.5 million for it. And he was very brave because he was the only one who bought them. And then in 2004, 2005, suddenly the D flawless market went on fire. And he made about $6 million. And it's all about timing. And then if you were to go back today, you'd probably get 4 or 5. So the diamond market is a bit of a roller coaster for white diamonds. Coloured diamonds, which I'll get onto, are a different story. And I know when you're investing a lot of money into something, but if one's in a fortunate enough position to spend a lot of money on jewellery, I always say, firstly and foremostly, fall in love with it and love the piece and wear it and enjoy it, because that's why the stone was cut. That's why the piece of jewellery was made. Right, this is a fun story. In my Christie's days, I used to go down to, and I still go down there a bit, I used to go down to Buenos Aires a lot. And the Buenos Aires office there would set up appointments and you meet clients and everything else. And I'd go down for about 3 days. And my second day in, the office got a telephone call. I've heard that your jewelry specialist is in town. I have something to show him. And she said, "Oh, let me have a look. We can fit you in at 3:45 tomorrow or 6." And he said, "No." He said, "You have to come to me, and it has to be on Friday." So it meant spending an extra couple of days. "But just so that you know, it'll be worth his while." So what do? Everybody thinks they've got the crown jewels. So 2 extra days in Buenos Aires, it can't be that bad, right? So anyway, so we drive about 45 minutes outside of Buenos Aires, and this very handsome man, tall man, head to toe, dressed in black. He's an artist. We go into his studio, probably the size of this room. It was all about drama. And in the middle of the room, there's this large table with a white tablecloth. And there's a little sort of raise in the middle of the table. And we talk about airlines and restaurants and, all the sort of stuff that's sort of small talk. And I said, "Look, curiosity is getting the better of me. I'm guessing what I've come to see is that little." He said, "Yes." And he said, "This is it." And it was by Van Cleef & Arpels. And Van Cleef & Arpels are very well known. One of their hallmark styles is the invisible setting, where the stones are held from the back, not claws on the top. But being the Argentine flag, they were sort of rather washed out pale blue sapphires. And it's sort of interesting, but, the Argentine flag. And yeah, so he said, "My father bought this from the estate of Eva Peron," which just changes the whole thing. And, Evita was on Broadway, and it was all of that stuff going on. And I said, "Well, that really does change things." And if it had belonged to you or I, it was probably a $25,000 or $35,000 brooch. And I said, which I sort of gingerly approached and he said, no. I want $150,000, $200,000 for this. And I said, well, look, I think we can get it. We can't start at that, but this is, there's a real story to tell here. Can I have the documentation? He said, I haven't got any. And I said, look, I can't put it in the catalogue saying property of it. You need to have physical proof. And I said, let me see. And we have, the auction houses and the dealers have a sort of love-hate relationship with Cartier and Van Cleef because we need them to verify things. But also they're very guarded because it gives them a distinct advantage when they're wanting to buy things. And I didn't get much luck from them. And then I went, I was trawling a very, very rudimentary internet then. There was sort of nothing. About 3 weeks later, I was in San Francisco, and I was between appointments, and I love wandering into secondhand bookshops. And I was just sort of flipping through, and there was a thing on Argentina. And I promise you this is a true story. I picked up one book, flicked through the pages, bang, there she is wearing it. It was just one of those, it was absolutely extraordinary. And this is also a story about luck, discovery, and caution. So we go gangbusters in the catalogue. We get a huge amount of publicity for it. And we want to take it an exhibition in Argentina, but we didn't want to go to Argentina in case it got impounded as a piece of historical importance and they wouldn't allow the re-export. So we had our exhibition in Punta del Este, which is the sort of Watch Hill of South America in Uruguay. And so we had a reception there. And this woman called Susana Jimenez comes in. Susana Jimenez is the Oprah Winfrey of South America. Massive TV star. The only difference is she looks like Donatella Versace. Her heels are about this high. Anyway, she comes in and she bursts into floods of tears. I can't do a Susana Jimenez impression. And she said, oh my God, Simon, I'm going to get my film crew, we're going to come up to New York, I'm going to buy this for the country, I'm going to come back wearing it. And I thought, great, we've got to buy it. Anyway, the sort of building the sale generates. We approached Madonna, we approached Andrew Lloyd Webber, and yeah. So we thought, well, at least we got Susana. Anyway, the auction arrives, and the sale room was at Park Avenue. It was before we moved to Rockefeller Center, and they had these hardwood floors. And in her stilettos, there was this echo around the room as she walked across and sat in the first row, waiting for the auction. And I think the estimate was 80 to 100, and it goes to 60, 80, 100, 120, 150, and she's bidding. I think, great. Then it gets to about 250, and we're all going to be happy. And then somebody we'd never heard of, and they were on the phone with a junior member of the staff. It was somebody who collected very important historical memorabilia and manuscripts, and it was his wife's 50th birthday. The bidding went up to $1 million. And the only way that Susana stopped is that she ran out of the room in floods of tears. Here's the cautionary tale bit. About 10 years later, the buyer called me and said, Simon, I don't know what possessed me. She never wears it. Do you think you can sell it for me? So I get in touch with Susana Jimenez, and we had stayed in touch a little bit. And she says, Simon, I'm so pleased I didn't buy that brooch. I don't know what this is. And for that, no, I'm not interested. And I tried a few other jewelry collectors, and I said, look, really, I just don't think I'm going to be able to. And he put it back at Christie's, and this is auction fever, and I'm going to show you another example as well. I think he got $250,000 for it. So beware of auction fever. But it's a great story, and it was a very fun thing to be. Now, I've got to be slightly delicate about introducing this piece. We had a jewelry sale from a couple called the De Portanovas. And I don't know for the more mature audiences here, if you remember the James Bond movie with Roger Moore, where he's beaten up by the two girls wearing cat seats in the house in Mexico, in Acapulco, and they sort of do flips around the room and then kick him and hit him. And anyway, the Portanovas own that house. Sandy de Portanova, they lived in Houston. I think she was a good New Jersey girl, actually. And her husband, Count de Portanova, who I think the title had been purchased, thought of himself as a bit of a jewelry designer. Now, love it or hate it, it's a very striking piece, but it wasn't brilliantly made. And it was part of Elizabeth Taylor's collection. I'd left Christie's by the time the Elizabeth Taylor sale had been, but I was very instrumental. I was very much part of the embryonic start of it. You know, it was a 10-year project, and again with Elizabeth Taylor, I met her a few times. Sometimes she could be outrageously flirtatious, fun, a mouth like a sewer, and just, with these incredible eyes, and you could see why she was totally captivating. And the next time you meet her, she didn't know what time of day it was. This was part of the collection. And this extraordinary 10-carat ruby by Bulgari was part of the collection. And she had astonishing coloured stones. And the reason I showed these two pieces is that when I was at Christie's, when she published her book, My Love Affair with Jewelry, and it was the story of her jewelry collection through 7 husbands, all the really great things were bought by Richard Burton. He really had an eye for colour. And whether it's this extraordinary ruby, which I think sold for $25 million, the monkey necklace was not bought by Richard Burton. And again, it was one of those pieces we think, well, obviously it's Elizabeth Taylor, but I'd gone by the time of the sale. Oh, sorry, just another part of the story. Oh gosh, I'm running out of time already. We had a jewellery auction for her. When we were launching the exhibition, we got Van Cleef, Cartier, Jarre, Bulgari to make pieces of jewellery, and she gave her original emerald engagement ring from Richard Burton, and we were going to have a charity auction for Lanphear, and we put together its own catalogue, and it was fantastic. And all the jewellers were totally on board, and everybody was very excited. And the day before the reception, the auction, I got a telephone call from her assistant saying, Simon, Miss Taylor would like you to meet her at 6 o'clock at the President's Suite at the St. Regis, and see the pieces coming up for auction. And so 6 o'clock came, and I was sort of waiting down in reception with my tray, and I didn't know whether it was going to be 6 o'clock or 10 o'clock. Anyway, 10 past 6, phone goes, Simon, go up. I spent 3 hours with her, 2 or 3 bottles of champagne, and the best time. And I'm going to get Michael to buy this, and I'm going to get all these big movie star names. I'm going to get Hint by this, Hint by this. You know, you've done such an amazing job. What time do you want me to be there? And I said, well, the reception starts at 6. The auction's going to be at 7. So 6:30, 6:45 would be great. Anyway, 6:30 turns around, 6:45, 7, 7:15, 7:30. And I think at about 7:45, she finally arrives. And it's horrible. Absolutely horrible. And it was just really sad because she was, you know, towards the end, one saw clearly how she was, which was amazing. And I'm sure, you know, sort of totally captivating to any man. And her jewellery collection overall was incredible. But in the main, thanks to Richard Burton. I'm going to move on to this, and then if I have time, I'm going to go back. One of the great crimes, one of the great jewellery crimes, when I was in London, people often ask me, what's the most beautiful thing you've ever sold? And I've been lucky enough, there have been, you know, again, irrespective of value, that, you know, there's such beauty in jewellery. But one of them has to be the diamond on the left, called the Agra diamond. It's a 32-carat pink diamond from the mines of Golconda, first recorded along with the Koh-i-Noor in 1486, belonged to the first Mughal Emperor Babur, went through the Mughal dynasty from then on, looted by those pesky British, and was bought at the beginning of the 20th century by somebody called Louis Winans, who was American, and made a lot of his money building the Moscow-St. Petersburg Railway. And he had a passion for gems and stones, and this was part of his collection. And after he died, it went on to the Scottish side of the family. Anyway, they needed, like all grand English families, they had all these enormous houses and no money to fix them. So they sold a collection of these stones, including the Agra diamond. And although it was a huge diamond, it was so soft and romantic and beautiful. You know, you could never say it was ostentatious. It was spellbinding. Anyway, the auction comes around, and again, at the time, it made a fortune, although it would make a gazillion times more. And I can tell you who bought it, because he's died. It was bought by a New York diamond dealer called Sam Abrams. And at the time of its sale, the GIA had just changed their grading of coloured diamonds in a much more specific way. So rather than just fancy pink or light, it was fancy vivid, fancy intense, fancy light, and when you get the different grades, obviously the value increases. And this was a very soft, very gentle pink. Anyway, he bought it, and he cut it into that, which is, I'm sorry, just another schlocky diamond. It was, you know, it's big. And I'd heard about the cutting of it, but never seen it. He had it for years, couldn't sell it. And he finally sold it to a member of the Al-Thani family because there was an exhibition at the Met a few years ago, Treasures of the Deccan Plateau in India, and this was on display. And honestly, I wept when I saw it. So that's a little sad story to tell. This is the Wittelsbach diamond, which is a 27-carat diamond. And this shows my naivety. And again, I hadn't been at Christie's in London that long. And also the head of the department. And coloured diamonds weren't the astonishing prices that they are now. And an art advisor bought this in. And this bottom facet here, that's called the culet, which is where diamond comes into a point. Sometimes they just nip it off. But this was so open, you could rest it on a table and it would stand upright. And at the time, it was considered not very attractive and not very nice. And the owners of it had cemented a sapphire underneath. And it gave it this sort of grey appearance. And at the time, the art advisor said, you know, our client is thinking of selling this and they want $3 million for it. And don't ask me why. We didn't have what you would think would be just complete common sense to say, well, look, let's take the sapphire off and see what it's like standing alone. We just thought, God, it's ugly, it's got that sapphire, no thanks, bye. Sotheby's sold it about 10 or 15 years later for a world record price for a blue diamond, and it was just absolutely sensational. So that's a very quick story, because I've got one story which I want to tell you. That was sort of the one that got away. That's too self-serving if I tell you about this, because I haven't got long. Okay, so this is my final story. What launched me into the sort of grown-up jewellery world, I was sitting at my desk at King Street, and everybody was out for lunch. Telephone went, Chris's jewellery department. She said, oh, do you sell cufflinks? I said, yes. And she said, well, how does it work? And I said, well, you know, if you bring them in, we'll give you an estimate of what we think, and we set a reserve, a minimum price, and then we'll let you know what the commission is. And the process is really very straightforward. And she said, I can't come in. I live in Shropshire, which is northwest of England. And I said, well, just pop them in the registered post. No, I don't like sending things in the post. And my wife and I, we have dear friends who live in Shropshire. Sort of 3 weeks later, we've been invited up there for the weekend. So I thought, great, I can take Friday off. And I said, well, it just so happens. So I checked with my boss. So up I go. And very nice elderly woman, no children, elderly husband, in a very nice but very modest house. No waterfront watch hill. It was very... and the most beautiful little pair of invisibly set sapphire cufflinks by Cartier in platinum. I said, God, these are gorgeous. I said, I think we'll probably get about $5,000. She said, great. And she said, what's your commission? 10%. Great, take them. So off I went, put them in the auction, and I think they made 7,000 or 8,000. She was happy, and I forgot about it. About 3 or 4 months later, she calls, and she asked for me. That was a good bit. She said, Simon, that was just, I wanted to know how the process works. I have a blue diamond I want to sell. And very often people say, oh, blue diamond, and it's an aquamarine. But I just thought, why not? Anyway, I go up, and she shows me this. This is a 7-carat blue diamond, a 6-carat orange diamond, and a 15-carat D-flawless diamond by Van Cleef & Arpels. And just so that you know, I still had spots and was wearing short trousers at this stage. You know, I wasn't really comfortable in this world, and I was sort of, you know, I knew what it was, but I had no idea what it was worth. No clue. So I spent hours looking at it, not studying it, thinking, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? What am I going to say? Anyway, I drew a deep breath and said, I think we'll get £1 million. And it was a number I'd never, ever said before. And I thought, this is it, £1 million. And she said, great, take it. Anyway, I think we got about 7 for it. Anyway, it's not the end of the story. About 6 months later, she calls. And she says, I've got 2 more things to sell. I have the waterfall and the swimming pool. I'm in my little beaten up Mini. 5 minutes after the phone, I put the phone down and went up to see her. That was the waterfall, made by Cartier in 1917. One diamond is bigger than the other. This is 25 or 30 carats. And it is just, and again, this is, you know, you can walk into a lot of these big Fifth Avenue jewelers and you see all this big jewelry. And it's really, I don't think, so great. It's so beautiful. It was so beautiful. And I don't have a photograph because it was before Chris's went digital. The swimming pool was also by Cartier, and it was a 300 carat sapphire. And I was just, you know, and there were sort of lots of other things. There were probably 20 or 30 things. Beautiful Art Deco jewelry, beautiful, beautiful. And I said, look, this is, you know, this is not Shropshire jewelry. You know, there's a story here for us to tell, which people will get so excited about. And it's just, you know, it doesn't get any better than this. And you know what it's like when you said the wrong thing? I thought, oh my God, and she looked at me. And she says, Simon, I've never questioned your estimates. I haven't questioned your commission. This is family, private jewelry. Don't go there. So I sort of backtracking and back, oh yeah, no, of course. Anyway, we sort of get back on track. And of course, I can't remember exactly what, but it's millions of dollars. And it was just incredible. And we always joke that if the sale did really well, because we both love caviar, 2 days after the auction, when I say a bucket of caviar arrived on my desk, I think we gave a party for 30 people. And she was just the nicest person in the world. 2 more parts to the story. And this is a great reflection in life on how you approach things. She calls about a year later and she said, you know, my husband's died and all the money was being left to charity. I'm just ready, you know, ready to let go the rock. So I've had the waterfall, I've had the swimming pool. So I go up to see her. She says, Simon, I don't know what to do. She said, I can't find it. I've forgotten where I put it. I think she had 3 banks up there. I spent 2 days getting safe companies, drilling through her safety deposit boxes. Gone. She was so philosophical about it. And so many people would think their world has come to an end. But she had had a very loving marriage. She was so content in her life. I said, what am I going to do? Am I going to agonize for this for the rest of my life? It's gone. And it was a great lesson. You own the objects don't own you. And about 6 months later, she died. And, well, because we went then to stay with these friends of ours. And it was a sort of English tradition, you know, after church, before lunch, you'd all go to somebody's house for a gin and tonic before, and you go. And out of the corner of my ear, I heard somebody, oh, do you hear Mrs. So-and-so has just died? My Mrs. So-and-so. And I sort of jumped from one to the next. I said, oh, yes, I met her a couple of times. You know, met her through work, and she was so nice. But I didn't really, she was very private. I didn't really know much about her family background and her history. She was of the generation. She was, I don't know if any of you know who I mean by Solly Joel. Solly Joel with Babe Barnato and Cecil Rhodes founded Consolidated Mines and De Beers. And she was the illegitimate daughter of Solly Joel, and this was her legacy. This was making life okay for her. And there was obviously this stigma that she had, which she couldn't let go. But I think to my dying day, it is probably as a sort of jewelry exercise. And as I say, I've been lucky enough to get involved in so many things, but I think that's probably the most remarkable. And being a junior specialist at Christie's, I'm delighted to say it did get me noticed and then get sent to New York. So good came out of it. So I've been going for an hour. I'm delighted to answer any questions. And I think I've kept you here a little bit longer than I was supposed to. I've got more, but